Jormungandr? Odin threw Jormungandr into the ocean, expecting to solve a problem. He created one that would last until the end of the world. Born to Loki and the giantess Angrboda, Jormungandr grew so enormous in the sea that he eventually encircled the entire world, gripping his own tail in his mouth to complete the loop. A serpent so vast that Norse cosmology simply built him into the shape of the earth itself. Thor encountered him twice. The first time, disguised, Thor tried to lift what he was told was a large cat and nearly pulled Jormungandr fully out of the ocean before Odin's forces intervened. The second time was no accident. Thor went fishing specifically for him, using an ox head as bait, hauling the serpent to the surface before the line was cut. Their final meeting is still to come, according to the prophecy. At Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungandr will kill each other simultaneously, the serpent's poison finishing the god 9 steps after the god's hammer finishes the serpent. Fenrir. The gods raised Fenrir themselves, and that decision is the reason Norse mythology has an apocalypse at all. Another child of Loki, Fenrir grew at a rate that terrified the Aesir, who initially only Tyr was brave enough to feed. A prophecy warned that Fenrir was destined to kill Odin, so the gods attempted to bind him, twice failing with chains strong enough to hold anything mortal, since Fenrir simply broke them. The binding that finally worked was forged from things that don't exist. The sound of a cat's footsteps, a woman's beard, a mountain's roots, a rope so unnatural Fenrir grew suspicious and demanded a god place a hand in his mouth as insurance. Tyr volunteered. When the binding held, Fenrir bit the hand off. He remains bound until Ragnarok, when the prophecy finally completes itself. Fenrir breaks free, kills Odin in single combat, and is killed moments later by Odin's son Vidar, closing a debt the gods created the day they decided a monster could be raised instead of destroyed. Nidhogger, at the very bottom of the world, gnawing at the roots of the tree that holds the 9 realms together, is a dragon most of the cosmos will never see and can still feel the effects of. Nidhogger lives beneath Yggdrasil, the world tree, chewing continuously on its roots, a slow, permanent act of destruction built into the foundation of existence itself. He shares the tree with an eagle at its highest branches, and the two despise each other so completely that a squirrel named Ratatoskr spends its entire existence running up and down the trunk, carrying insults between them. Nidhogger's role isn't really to attack anyone, it's to represent decay as a permanent resident of the universe, proof that even the tree holding reality together is being consumed from below the entire time it stands. At Ragnarok, Nidhogger is said to fly free from the roots, carrying the corpses of the dead in his wings, arriving last after everything else has already ended. The Kraken. Not every Norse monster comes from the old sagas. Some come from the sailors who kept telling stories long after the Viking Age ended. The Kraken emerged from Scandinavian folklore as a creature large enough to be mistaken for an island, sleeping just beneath the surface until a ship anchored on its back, at which point it would submerge and take the vessel down with it. Descriptions varied. Some called it a colossal squid, others a crab-like leviathan, but the core fear stayed consistent across centuries of retelling. The ocean itself could turn out to be alive, and there would be no warning before it moved. Sailors reported vast circular patches of churning water and disturbed fish as the only sign the Kraken had been beneath them at all. It never appears in the oldest Norse myths the way Jormungandr or Fenrir do. It belongs to a later, more maritime layer of Scandinavian storytelling, but it endures because it captures something the older myths already knew. The sea does not need a name to be terrifying. Surtur has been waiting longer than almost anything else in Norse mythology, standing guard at the border of Muspelheim, the realm of fire, since before the 9 worlds were even fully formed. A fire giant armed with a burning sword, described as brighter than the sun itself, Surtur's entire purpose in Norse cosmology is deferred to a single future event, Ragnarok, when he leads the forces of Muspelheim across the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, breaking it permanently under the weight of his army. His battle is reserved for Freyr, the god who once traded away his own magic sword for love, and will face Surtur at the end of the world without it. Freyr loses. Surtur's final act, after the gods have fallen, is to set the entire world on fire, not as one battle among many at Ragnarok, but as the mechanism that ends the myth cycle itself, burning the 9 realms down, to make room for the new world prophesied to rise from the ashes afterward. Garmr. Every underworld needs a guard, and Hell's realm belongs to Garmr, a monstrous hound chained at the entrance to Hell, blood-stained and howling, marking the boundary between the world of the dead and everything beyond it. Some sources describe him as Fenrir's canine counterpart, a lesser reflection of the same role, a beast bound because what he guards is too important to leave unguarded, and too dangerous to leave unbound. Garmr's fixed opponent at Ragnarok is Tyr, the same god who lost his hand securing Fenrir career, meaning Tyr's entire mythological arc bookends with binding one monster and dying to another. Their fight at the end of the world is mutual. Garmr and Tyr are prophesied to kill each other in single combat, one of several matched pairs written into Ragnarok, where god and monster are destined to erase each other simultaneously, leaving neither victorious and neither surviving to see what comes after. Hraesvelgr. At the northern edge of the sky sits a giant in the shape of an eagle, and every gust of wind across the 9 realms exists because he is moving. Hraesvelgr's name translates roughly to corpse swallower, and Norse cosmology credited him directly with the creation of wind. The beating of his enormous wings was said to be the literal cause of every breeze and storm across the world below. He does not attack, does not hunt, and appears in almost no narrative myths at all. His entire function is structural, sitting permanently at the edge of the sky as a piece of how the world mechanically operates, rather than a character who does anything within it. Of every monster on this list, Hraesvelgr is the strangest kind of threat. Not a beast to be feared for what it might do, but a force already built into the weather itself, moving the sky every single day, without a single myth ever depicting anyone trying to stop him. Draugr. Not every monster in Norse mythology is singular. Draugr are undead beings that occur repeatedly across the sagas, corpses that refuse to stay in their burial mounds, retaining the full strength they had in life, along with the ability to grow larger and heavier, making them stronger in death than they ever were as living men. Wealthy or vengeful individuals were the most likely to return as Draugr, guarding their burial treasure with a violence that made looting a Viking grave a genuinely dangerous act. Draugr could pass through solid earth, control the weather around their burial site, and in several sagas shapeshift entirely, taking the form of animals to move undetected. Killing one required more than a single blow. Sagas describe heroes needing to wrestle a Draugr back into its grave, decapitate it, and burn the remains completely, since anything less risked the creature simply rising again. They represent something distinct from the cosmic-scale threats elsewhere on this list. Proof that in Norse belief, even an ordinary death didn't guarantee an ending. Ymir. Before there were gods, before there were monsters, there was only Ymir, and everything that exists afterward exists because he stopped existing. The first being in Norse cosmology, Ymir formed from the meeting of fire and ice in the primordial void, a giant so vast that an entire race of frost giants grew directly from his sweat and his legs while he slept. Odin and his brothers killed him, not out of conflict, but out of necessity, using his body as raw material to build the 9 realms themselves. His flesh became the earth, his blood became the seas, his bones became the mountains, his skull became the sky, held up at its 4 corners by 4 dwarves. Ymir is the only entry on this list that isn't defeated by a hero or bound by a god. He is simply consumed by the act of creation itself, a monster whose death is not an ending in the myth cycle, but the very first beginning. The raw material every other story on this list is quite literally built from. Grendel. Grendel doesn't come from the Eddas, but he belongs on this list anyway. An Anglo-Saxon monster descended, according to the poem that tells his story, from Cain himself, cursed and exiled into the marshlands outside human civilization. For 12 years, Grendel terrorized the mead hall of King Hrothgar, entering at night to kill and devour the king's warriors, driven by a hatred of joy and celebration that the poem never fully explains beyond his exile from everything humanity had built. No weapon forged by men could pierce his skin, a curse of protection that made him functionally undefeatable by conventional combat. Beowulf ended him anyway, refusing weapons entirely and meeting Grendel bare-handed, tearing the monster's arm from its socket in a fight that sent Grendel fleeing back into the marsh to die alone. His mother returned for revenge shortly after, extending a war that should have ended with a single death into a second, deeper battle beneath the water where she made her home. Proof that even Grendel's ending came with unfinished business attached to it.